Monogam-ish contains content intended for mature audiences. The views expressed here are for entertainment purposes only. Please enjoy the show.
And so, the first time I'd ever met her, we, went and cuddled, and we got smoothies and drove up to this, overlook, ate our dinner, and, went back and, laid in bed, and we read poetry. It was, a crazy night. It was so much fun. Right. And so we hung out a few more times, and she was just like, okay, I want you to, meet the poly fam. And so I went down there a couple weeks later, and as the last one in, it was funny because these people legitimately put me through an interview process.
Oh, I believe it.
It was interesting. It was unexpected, but it was still kind of fun. I got there. I'd been there for 5 minutes. Prince, one of the other polyfam members, invites me in to sit down at the table, and he's like, "Hey, man," he sits across from me. I was like, "Hey, it's nice to meet you. It's nice to meet you too." And he's like, "So, what are your traumas, and how are you dealing with them?" Right out the gate.
Right.
Yeah, it was really
the first 30 seconds.
Yeah, right. It was super intense.
Hi, Ishes. Welcome to Monogam-ish. I'm Justina.
And I'm Kenji.
And we're Monogam-ish. Welcome to another great episode. We just finished filming.
Spoke with Nate.
Yes. There you go.
He had a particularly interesting story because he's a part of a 7-person polycule.
Mm-hmm.
I know. Mm-hmm. I like it. And it made me realize, because a lot of what we talk about is sex and sex-oriented, but there's a lot of relationships within the non-monogamy lifestyle that are completely not physical, that have no sexual, touching or kissing or anything of any type.
That does beg the question, can you have a polycule with almost a sexless connection?
Almost a sexless family,
Right.
which is, hey, if you can, you can.
Yeah,
it sounded like awesome. He was too,
He was, yeah.
And it's not that he wasn't getting his, needs met.
Oh, yeah,
he was
absolutely.
getting sex in other places outside of the polycule, which you'll hear him talk about. But it was really awesome to hear his story because, like I said, it really kind of hit home for us because our besties are poly, and we've always considered it separate. Like our besties are poly and they're in their relationship, and then there's me and Mr. Fullwood, and we're for the most part monogamish.
Yes.
Mostly just swinger type lifestyle and not having an emotional connection. However, we do have that with our family.
Yeah.
And in our family, we call them PCG.
Yeah.
PCG.
That's our PCG.
Pine Cone Gang.
Yeah.
And it's weird because he talks about having a slogan, and PCG is own your shit.
Own your shit.
Own your shit. Be who you are. Come authentic. Be real. Understand that when you're not, we're gonna call your ass out.
Yep.
And
that's right.
and that's kind of how our little PCG fam works.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really interesting to see that. You guys will have to check it out. But
yes, but what did you guys do this weekend?
So it was a sock party for the girls. Holidays are coming up. There was 44 of us. 44 girls, 44 socks. And so what the whole premise is that you bought socks, not like stocking, Christmas, but socks that you could wear.
Right.
And they could be knee-high, thigh-high, whatever, all different kind of socks. And you stuffed them with little gifts, and then we did a white elephant type thing. So we picked numbers, we went in order, you could steal. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, that sounds fun.
So I got some furry socks.
Yeah. I didn't do anything. Me and the kids hung out.
Yeah.
Just you and the Higgins?
Yeah, me and the kids hung out.
Oh, so I was the one that did something fun this weekend.
Yes, only one who did something fun this weekend.
Oh my gosh. So Trish and I were invited over to a play party by someone in a group that I was in. Shout out to Steffi, who hosted an amazing play party. It was a pretty small get-together. There was probably about maybe less than 20 of us. And even less played, actually. Trish and I found a couple of people to play with, and she had it at her house, and it was a really small 2-story house. But the way it was laid out, it was amazing. Almost everywhere had wipes and little chocolate kisses, and she had plenty of snacks, sandwiches. So you had plenty to eat, plenty to drink. There was a bring your own toys and booze type thing and weed, which is what we did. We brought joints because we really don't like to drink all that much.
Absolutely.
Steffi was just awesome host. I was like, let me know when another play party's happening because that small group of people were just so much fun.
Oh, that's awesome.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Right on, man. Congratulations.
And hopefully we'll be having her on the show pretty soon. So
Hell yes.
We're always looking for new content. We want you guys to
Please.
come out and share your stories. They're all so damn unique.
yes.
I know.
This one coming up, you guys are going to love. So get out your popcorn and your drinks and make sure that you sit down and listen intently because you get to learn a lot from this guy. And he's good at educating, too.
Yes.
Yeah. Runs his own, him and somebody else, his partner, runs their own, education stuff or whatever, Hell yeah.
And we're always trying to get more content out to you guys. And if you want to support us, please, you can make a one-time donation on Cash App, or you can go to our Patreon. You can get a lot of exclusive behind-the-scenes content. With this show, we did our first couch
We
confessional.
did.
Oh,
Doing the couch
yes.
confessions.
Yes.
Think of taxi cab confessions, but with
Or
all,
like Penthouse Forum.
yes. This is the couch where you
Yep.
spill your most sexiest stories.
Oh yeah.
Exactly.
I
So,
think my wife spilled some stuff on that couch too.
Mr. Fullwood,
Trish too.
behave. All right, it's just, you know where to check us out. Go online to monogamishpodcast.com and you will be able to have a direct link to our Cash App as well as our Patreon.
And don't forget, there's a dash between the M and the I.
Enjoy the show.
Now introducing Nate.
Today we have Nate.
I know. We've never met him before.
I
This is our
know.
first time.
Nate, welcome to the show.
And you
Hey,
reached
thank you
out to
guys.
us.
I did.
Yes.
Appreciate it. Thank you so very much.
So you have an interesting, we've noticed a lot lately, a lot of our new followers are polyamorous. And so on TikTok especially, we've had a lot of new followers that are coming through and people that subscribe to our channels and they want to have more polyamorous content. So that you're clicking the box here.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah.
So you are part of a polycule, correct?
Yeah, so I am a member of a 7-person polyfam. We just call ourselves the Fam Bam.
The Fam Bam.
The
wow.
Fam Bam. We usually hang out at a house in Aurora. Every couple of weeks, once a month, something like that. We try to get together. But yeah, it's really special. There's me, obviously, the nesting couple that owns the house, and then we got somebody else that lives in Boulder. The other 2 polyfam members actually just moved out to the Midwest, kind of close to Chicago, so we're a little bit spread out. But yeah, it's interesting for sure. It's a lot of fun. Just a giant cuddly group of people.
Right?
Wow.
I know.
So
Sounds fun.
7 of you. So how did that happen? So start from the beginning. What made you realize that you were polyamorous?
Yeah, so for me it was a really slow developing process, and monogamy just never really sat right with me. Like even when I was a kid, they talk about like this is your one person, and like I definitely took that narrative and internalized it, but it just never really felt right. There was always this part that was like just one, like one person's got to do all the things. Like it just seemed it just didn't fit. It seemed almost unreasonable to me. But I spent a really long time trying to like fit that mold. So I've got a string of marriages. I've been married 3 times.
Wow.
Yeah, once to my high school sweetheart, and then a girl that I worked with, and then somebody that I met on Tinder of all places.
Oh shit.
Yeah, and so that was my most recent one, and really that's where my second wife and I we flirted with the idea of non-monogamy. So there was another couple that lived next door that we played with a couple times. She ended up hooking up with a guy at work for a while, and there was just a lot of things that weren't done with a lot of intention. Like it was a lot of really unhealthy stuff. And so
no conversations beforehand. No.
Right. Yeah. Just kind of like built in, and even her dating her coworker was really just because I was suspicious and insecure around it. So like she talked about this guy all the time, and so I basically convinced myself, I was like, well, if I tell her she can date him, then I don't have to worry about her cheating on me with him.
Okay.
And so we only opened up like that side of the marriage. I stayed monogamous to her.
Interesting.
Yeah, through that, and so she
Yeah.
dated.
Have you thought about that previously? Like, had you thought about, had anybody else caught your eye?
So when I teach my classes, I tell people that I've been ethically non-monogamous for like 10 years, but non-monogamous for my entire dating life. So, yeah, so there was a lot of like just lying and sneaking around and cheating on my part. And it just like, it burns people. Like I really, really severely hurt a lot of people with my behavior and just my inability to show up authentically. And, you know, I think that's where I got that idea, you know, is like because of my own behavior, like I think I just saw things in her that reminded me of my own infidelities. I don't know if that's a word or not, but it should be. My own behaviors. And so it like kind of put up all these red flags. And so, yeah, I was like, hey, X guy seems to like come up a lot. You seem to like really talk about him a lot. And would you be interested in this? We just went out to dinner one night and kind of talked about it. And through the end of that marriage, it was one of my veto-based relationships, which is something I talk a lot about. And I'm just not a huge fan of veto-based relationships. They just tend to work out with like lots of people being hurt. And so that one got kind of toward the end. She was getting.
How would you describe a veto-based relationship for our viewers? That
me too.
Gotcha. Yeah. So, no worries. Yeah. So a veto-based relationship is any relationship in which somebody is not, who's not in that relationship has the ability to end it. So like the real life example, you know, we're all hanging out and you and I start dating independently for whatever reason. And they're usually there to like protect the primary relationship. But so before you and I start dating, you guys come up with the agreement that like if I'm ever threatening to the relationship, if he ever feels like I'm unhealthy for you, if he thinks that it's unhealthy for your relationship, he has the ability to come in and just be like, you can't see Nathan anymore.
okay.
Like I am
wow.
vetoing that relationship.
Got it.
Okay.
And it's really, really common, especially with a lot of people just starting out in non-monogamy. Like that happens a lot. And I'd never heard that term. I'd never like done any research. I hadn't read any books. It just like was something that naturally made a lot of sense to me. And so as with happens with most vetoes, I came to her and I was like, hey, you and this guy are getting really close to each other. We're having lots of problems. I need you to stop seeing him so that we can work on our stuff. So that was, I want to say like 2008, 2009, and
wow.
they are still very happy together.
Are they?
Yeah, so it's one of those, and that's a very common result of the person trying to enact a veto. It is that you end up with the person that got vetoed. One of my more consistent humans and connections right now is actually somebody that my former partner vetoed, and so that's a relationship I'm no longer a part of, and it's just something that inherently brings mistrust into that connection. You know, like
Right.
it's having that veto enacted with me is going to affect every connection that you make from now until forever. You know, and it's just this idea, and it can give you the idea and these thoughts that like, man, I don't know why you don't trust me. Like, I don't know why you don't trust me to handle my own business. You don't trust that I love and am committed to you. Like, you're so afraid of this other person. And so if it doesn't happen eventually, it's at the minimum going to cause like just fear and mistrust inside of any relationship. And it's just not good stuff to deal with.
So how did you initially educate yourself on these different types of relationships, and was it just by meeting different people?
Yeah, meeting different people, trial by fire. It was a lot of like, I've described my coming into polyamory as like a process of ripping myself apart and putting myself back together again, just like over and over and over again. So like every time I thought I had this stuff figured out, like something else would happen that would just like force me to change my entire worldview and approach to it.
Wow.
Wow.
So I went into my third marriage, and she and I had both had these like poor experiences with non-monogamy. And so we went into this like we are going to be 100% monogamous to each other forever. She is she's pansexual, and so that was like just not sitting well with her. Like through like our first like year and a half of dating, we'd moved in together. And like it was really hard for her. There was just a lot of like persons that she was finding herself like attracted to, and connections that she wanted to explore, and things that I like biologically or physiologically at a base level couldn't provide. So we had a conversation around that. We ended up jumping into a Kik group, which is like a little text-based platform. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Kik.
I was about to say, I grabbed, I guess last week it runs one.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Yeah, and so we jumped into a Kik group. I ended up running that one for a while. It was called 303 Kink. My ex and I ran it together, and we met a few people in there that were like just full-blown polyamorous, and I talked to them and identified with them really well. That relationship ended just mostly because it was not that she's like a bad person in any way, shape, or form. We were just unhealthy for each other.
Okay.
And so we went our separate ways, and came out of that and like just started like reading and meeting more people. I met the person that I now teach Cal classes with. I met her in a Facebook group online. We started our own little group. That actually happened right before my most recent wife and I separated. And so she and I got closer, and she's had like a lot of experience. She was like really already pulled into this community, so she was able to give me a lot of verbiage for things that I didn't have and really trigger lots of like thoughts and feelings around things. And ultimately landed on some version of relationship anarchy.
Okay. We've heard a lot about that.
Yeah, and so one of the first things that I talk about in our monogamy intro to non-monogamy 101 class is the terminology. This is all like super new stuff. And so what this term means to one person, it's going to mean something completely different to someone else. So for relationship anarchy for me just basically means that I don't prioritize people based on my sexual connection with them. So I've got some of my closest human beings are people that I will probably never have a sexual relationship with, but they're just like wildly important people. Like they play a huge role in my life. My relationships tend to be really fluid. You know, just because it's a sexual connection today doesn't mean it's going to be one tomorrow. Just because it isn't right now doesn't mean that might not happen at some point in the future, or maybe even just once. I've got this kind of like personal tagline that I kind of apply to everything, and it's show up, be authentic, and handle your shit.
Love it.
And so I just try to do that. Yeah, just try to do that in all of those relationships. I don't allow rules to be placed in my relationships. I focus on boundaries, so things that control my behavior and how people approach me, but I'm not going to tell anybody that they can't do this or can't do that, or can do this and can't do that. And just really want everybody to be able to be as happy as they can. You know, I think a cornerstone belief in all of that is this idea that the individual person in any connection is always more important than the actual connection itself. And that, you know, just because you said you were going to be together is never a good reason to stay in a relationship. You know, that doesn't mean that if it gets hard, you bail out, because there's like conflict with everyone.
Right.
But it gives you an opportunity to really transition relationships. Like you can change them. We call it a la carte relationships, where you can like take what works and like leave the rest. And then if transitioning isn't working, you can move on. And you know, that can be hard and it can be painful and it certainly sucks. Like none of those feelings go away, but at the end of it, it just allows everybody to be their best selves, you know, just express themselves in the way that means the most to them.
Nice.
How do you manage your time?
With Google Calendars and lots of communication.
Okay, so all 7 of you are part of a Google Calendar, and you guys.
So there is a family chat that we all hang out in.
Okay.
And so like for me personally, the RA side, relationship anarchy. So the RA side of that is that like polyfam isn't like my only connections, and I actually don't have. I'm not in a sexual relationship with anybody in the polyfam. Like I just love them all deeply in very different ways.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of us that are function like that in there. I think through this, 3 or 4 of us do that same way. So we have connections and relationships outside of the family.
Okay.
And you know, there's some of those get brought in. One of my most entangled relationships is someone that like spends a lot of time around the family, and we've kind of like adopted her as one of the cousins, like people that like everybody in the fam loves, and she comes around whenever she gets an opportunity. And we love having her there, and she loves being there. And then I've got, you know, connections, and everybody knows about it. We're pretty prominent at this point. I get like, it's weird. I've even had people like, we'll be out at the club. I've gone to tracks before and had like total strangers run up to me and be like, "Oh my gosh, you're Nathan. You're one of the people in the fam bam." And I'm like, "Oh, this isn't weird at all." Right. But yeah, so the fam, we get together when we can. We did like a Thanksgiving dinner on like a random Wednesday. We're doing Christmas dinner at my new house a few days before Christmas, and we find the time to get together as a whole when we can. But you know, we're 7 adults. It's rare that we're all able to get ourselves in the same place at the same time. But
so what are the dynamics like? Is it female, male, or any of them married? What are the dynamics within that
so
polycule?
none of them are married.
Okay.
So 2 of them do live together. The rest of us, oh, actually, I take that. I'm not sure what the 2 that went to the Midwest, their living situation is. I know they're at least living very close together, and that the second one followed the girl that had moved out there to be closer to her. They're like really, really heavily entangled with each other.
Okay.
Yeah, so 2 of us live together.
And I'm assuming within the polycule, some of them do have sexual relationships.
I think right, and it shifts a lot. Like those balances, like who's like, we just all kind of have that same approach. Like we're gonna do whatever feels authentic.
Right.
But yeah, basically everybody else in the polyfam, for the most part, has a sexual connection with somebody else in the polyfam.
Okay.
We've never everybody just kind of assumes from the outside that like we get together and it's like full blown orgy,
Orgies.
guys.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
That's what's
like-
always the assumption.
like let's jump in. Like we're just all getting together every weekend and just like jumping into a pile of sweaty flesh.
If you're not monogamous and fucking one person, if you're non-monogamous in any form, you're fucking everybody.
Everyone.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Random people across the street. You're just like, hey, you.
Right.
It's on.
Exactly.
Come on
Back
down.
I got a Subaru in 10 minutes. Like,
Right.
yeah, so the dynamics shift a lot, and I think that and, it's not that different from any other family in that regard. The relationships are always going to be stronger or weaker, or change over time. It's just we all love each other. We know that we can count on each other, that we show up for each other, and
Okay.
we have a crap ton of fun when we're hanging out together.
Amazing.
Yeah.
The first time, and so I'm the latest and last addition to the polyfam. Soria, who's my former roommate, I met her through Facebook, a Facebook group. She was looking for somebody to go hiking with, and it was really funny because she messaged me like an hour before I get
Is that
there.
the Menage Facebook group?
Yeah, it's Menage.
Ah.
Yeah, and so Sori hits me up and like an hour before I get down there, and she's like, hey, I just want you to know I'm super saturated right now. I'm not looking for any kind of a romantic partner. I'm really just looking for somebody to go hiking with. As long as you're cool with that, like we can still meet up. And that's like, I try my best to like not come at this stuff with any expectations. Because if I go down there with the idea of like, oh man, she's a super cute dominatrix girl, I'm going to like have a crazy night with. Like if I go with that expectation and then something else happens, I'm going to be disappointed. So
Right.
it's like, hey, a new human. Let's go meet him and see what
It's
happens.
our tagline. No
No
sex.
sex-
No sexpectations.
Yeah, sexpectations. I like that. Instantly stealing. Yeah, and it was so funny. So I got down there. She answered the door, and I'm like in all of my hiking gear, and she's like, "Hey, it's nice to meet you. I'm Soria. I've had a really long day. Can we just go cuddle?" And so
Okay.
like the first time I'd ever met her, we like went and cuddled, and we got smoothies and drove up to this like overlook. She lived down in Colorado Springs at the time, so we drove up to this overlook and like ate our dinner and like went back and like laid in bed and we read poetry. It was like a crazy night. It was so much fun.
Right.
And so we hung out a few more times, and she was just like, "Okay, I want you to like meet the polyfam." And so I went down there a couple weeks later, and as the last one in, it was funny because like these people like legitimately put me through an interview process.
Oh, I thought-
Okay.
Like it was interesting. It was unexpected, but it was still kind of fun. I got there. I'd been there for like 5 minutes. Prince, one of the other polyfam members, like invites me in to sit down at the table, and he's like, "Hey man," he like sits across from me. I was like, "Hey, it's nice to meet you. It's nice to meet you too." And he's like, "So what are your traumas and how are you dealing with them?" Like
Okay.
right out the gate.
Right.
Yeah, it was really
The first 30 seconds.
Yeah, right.
It was super intense. Yeah. Another one of the polyfam members ended up camping with me a couple weeks later, just through mutual friends. We'd gotten invited to the same camping trip. And we're like sitting around a campfire, and she breaks out like a list of questions. I can't remember if she had a notepad or not, but it certainly felt like she did. And I guess Soria had asked her, she's like, "Hey, ask Nathan some questions, like vet him, get a feel for this guy." So she like breaks out her questions, and it was probably like 40 minutes of sitting around the campfire, just
Wow.
like firing off all these questions. And I really appreciated it. Like to me, it just felt like the questions weren't disrespectful. Like the process wasn't like attacking or jarring in any way. It just felt like so cool that these people like loved each other so much that they were like, "Hey, let's really get to know this person before we bring him into our home." And we've got, people have like, kids that are involved too. So there's like
Right.
a lot at stake when you bring somebody into that environment. And so, yeah, it was an interesting process to go through for sure, but it was fun.
That's awesome.
Nice.
So how do you manage communication? You said you're all in a group text. Do you is there some sort of notification when you start a relationship outside of the polycule?
For me, not necessarily, and that's part of like the relationship anarchy side for me is like I just like that level of communication is something I don't really have time for. So like I'll share like, really important new connections like as they come up, but there's no like agreements around like you have to share this, this, and this.
Right.
You have to share this, this, and this. I do have one connection that is my most entangled one. She's like my climbing partner. We travel together a lot. We see each other a few times a week. We both have a ridiculous love of cats, so we like talk like I babysit her cats when she's out of town, and she babysits my cats out of town. And like she's probably the one person that's more of a romantic connection that I really just do tell all of that stuff to. She's one of my longer, actually I think my longest standing connection at this point too. And so she's just got such a long view on me that it's just like she's a fantastic resource to like just tell all of this stuff to, and she's like really great at being honest with me about like when she sees healthy things and unhealthy things, and so I do have that kind of connection with one person. But even then, it's just something that like naturally developed. There was never this like, if you want to be in a relationship with me, you have to tell me these 10 things every time they happen, no matter what.
Right.
It was just a really, really natural development for us. The sexual component of it is a lot more defined communication. It's around, especially when you start talking about like who you're using barriers with and who you're not using barriers with and testing.
Correct. And that's why I asked,
Yeah,
about because there's no sexual contact within the polycule, then it's like one of those things where do you really need to tell them who you're having sex with at that point?
Right. Yeah. And so and I don't necessarily share that with them. It's not,
Right.
we like sharing all of our stories like anything else. So like if we're hanging out, I'd be like, oh man, last weekend.
Of course.
But yeah, it's funny. You get to a point. I've gotten to a point now where like just to save time, like I get tested every so often. As soon as I get my test results, I just like throw out a group text. I'm just like, hey everybody, here they are, like just so you know. But right now, the like who you're using barriers with and all of that stuff, I do communicate what all of that stuff looks like, so just everybody has a real clear understanding of like what my sex life looks at. And I think that's a super important part of their ability to consent fully with honest information. So, whatever they're comfortable with, whatever they're not comfortable with.
Absolutely. And because you said those relationships are fluid, so even though you're not having sex with them right now, doesn't mean that that's not a possibility in the future. So it's easier in a sense that they already know, they've received your test results, they already know who your other partners are, so that if that moment comes up, I don't want to say it's not a mood killer, but it's those conversations are better had before you're heading to the bedroom.
Right. For sure.
Yeah. So how do you manage your time with them pretty well? How do you manage your physical relationships? Do you have physical relationships outside of them?
Yeah, all of my physical relationships right now are outside of them.
Okay, so how many other additional relationships do you have outside of your polycule then?
Oh man, it depends on what you call a relationship. Yeah, so that's I use the term connection because people don't have like any assumptions around it. If I say I have a connection with this person, nothing gets auto-populated with like what their version of relationship means or partner means or like play partner or fuck buddy or whatever.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah, so I'm kind of slutty, like I'm not gonna lie. Like,
me too.
I think we all are.
I think that's all of us here.
We all are.
Yeah, so I've got 2 or 3 people that I see pretty consistently that I've got a sexual connection with.
Okay.
And then like people, you could consider them like satellite connections, like people that I see every once in a while, where like that's a possibility. There's a place not too far from here, where Ella's story actually kind of happened, but we've got a venue downtown. One of my friends, one of my closest connections, has a space down here that we use to like just host events, and like those things go like every couple weeks.
Okay.
Usually. And so there's like people that I just play with in party situations, and I really enjoy play parties. I go to a lot of them. I don't participate in the sexual side of them all that often. Like I just love the sex positive environment, which isn't to say that like the mood doesn't hit in the right moment and suddenly like I'm just surrounded by elbows,
Right.
that certainly happens. But yeah, so it's hard to like even quantify a specific number, because it's just not, everything is so fluid and everything's so open that there's like, there's not like there's 7 or there's 3. It really just depends on how you define that. Like, you get into like what counts as sex and what doesn't count as sex and like
Okay.
all of that stuff.
So you teach classes. You've got to the point now where it sounds like you've tried all different relationship styles, figured
I've
out
been
what's
through a
worked,
lot of them. Yeah.
what works and doesn't for at least you. And so now your goal is to educate other people.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons that I reached out to you guys. The main reason that I educate through all of that stuff is like I came into this from a ridiculously starting at a very unethical place, and then made absolutely every possible mistake that I could think of along the way. Like if there was a way that I could fuck something up, like that is the way that I was going to try it. And so getting into the education side is really an opportunity for me to like hopefully help other people avoid all of those same missteps that I went through.
Wow.
Okay. And you said you teach them with a partner, correct?
I do. Yeah, I do. I actually met her in the Menage group that was mentioned a little bit earlier. There was a post, and I don't even remotely remember what the post was about, but like I'd kind of gone into this group hoping there'd be like more advice and more like actual conversations, and Menage is great for what it is. Like I appreciate the environment for sure, but there's not a lot of like really defined like discussion stuff. Like there's so many people in there. There's so many voices that like finding people that are really in a similar place that you are and then having conversations around that. Like there's just so many people that are audience to that conversation that are going to bring in, it gets disjointed really fast. And it's really hard to like stay on track or stay on topic. And so she had made a post something to that effect, like just trying to keep this conversation on track. And I replied to her and I was like, hey, this sounds great. I would really love a space where we could just have like very specific questions, because Menage is like every type of non-monogamy is in there, and which is honestly what makes it so much fun. Like it's just like every single type is in there. And so she had popped up and we ended up like starting our own group, and we just like added the people that we knew that were in there, and she and I just got like closer and closer over the years. She's a beautiful example of somebody that I'm incredibly close with, that I'm super, like, she's just an incredibly important person. There's like no sexual connection there. Yeah, and I would be absolutely shocked if there ever was, but like we just connect on a really deep emotional level, and we can share a lot with each other. And so she got hooked up with CAL, which is the Colorado Center for Alternative Lifestyles. She became their education director. She was looking for somebody that was like a co-teacher, and she was just like, oh yeah, Nathan. Like Nathan's the one that I would love to do this with.
Awesome.
We got in there and got off and running.
So you have 2 different classes that you teach.
And so we're a little bit on hiatus right now. Just a lot of like life changes going on with a lot of different people. So we're trying to like figure that out. But the 2 classes that I teach are Introduction to Non-monogamy, Non-monogamy 101, and then Codependency and Jealousy in Non-monogamous relationships.
Okay. And where can people take your classes when they're going on?
When they're going, and so there's 2 sides. There's also CAL also has a pretty prolific kink side that does a lot of like kink classes, like everything from public play spaces to like setting up safe scenes, consent, safety, all of that stuff. So they put a lot of that stuff on Meetup. You can find it on Facebook. They advertise on FET. Just look for the CAL, is the abbreviation for it.
Okay, awesome. So tell us a little bit, just give us an overview of what your Monogamy 101 class would kind of look like, or non-monogamy.
Yeah, so the Non-monogamy 101 is base level stuff. We talk a lot about terms, about potential different relationship structures, about different resources that you can go to. We have a good section of the class is dedicated to like ways that you can sort of slowly integrate yourself into that. A lot of people come into non-monogamy from a place of like an already established primary relationship, and they're looking for ways to explore, whether that's like just being open, if they're swingers, if they're looking for like just play party environments, to like full on poly. Like people will struggle through that, and there's like a lot of hard feelings and a lot of programming that's built in there. And so we have the analogy of running a race. like getting ready for the race, like practicing for the race, getting the right equipment for the race, practicing for the race, and then you take off before that. And so we just build an analogy around that. That's a large portion of the class. And then we always try and leave time for questions at the end, just for people to kind of fire back and forth with us with whatever problems or stuff they're facing.
Okay. So do you have people come into that class that you've found that after they finish the class, they're like, oh, this isn't for me?
I don't know. We do ask for student feedback. We have like a little feedback form you can go back and fill out. So I don't know if that's ever happened. There's certainly a lot of people that are like, that come in without like a clear understanding of even why they're there. Like they're just curious human beings that found out about this, and they're like, oh, I just want to go learn about non-monogamy stuff for a couple hours. It's not that they're even necessarily pursuing that path. They just want to broaden their horizons and get information about it.
Okay.
So that's really common. We'll have people coming in that are like actively struggling with something specific, and so they tend to like hang out toward the, and the classes are usually fantastic. Like people are active and participating and really, doing a great job of listening, but you can tell every once in a while there's somebody that's just there to like get to the question segment. Like they have got like 3 things they're trying to figure out, and they want to just like drop those and try and get some advice and some direction on them.
So those are the people that really need more of the therapy side of things, or maybe like a one-on-one type.
Right. Yeah. And we both have kind of a list of therapists that we know that, depending on their availability, specialize in some form of non-monogamy. So like we're really careful when we do those classes not to step in that bounds. We're like, hey, you should probably talk to a professional about this.
Right.
This is the direction that you can go. Or like, hey, this is a great book about attachment, like Polysecure, an amazing book. Everyone should read that book.
What is the book?
Polysecure.
Polysecure.
Who is it by?
I think her name is Jessica Fern, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a fantastic book. That one looks at attachment styles, which is a pretty established psychological theory, and applies it to non-monogamous relationships. And it's fantastic. She does an amazing job with it. But yeah, so we direct people to like different books and different resources that we've read. We can recommend like, this is a really great question. We don't have a lot of time today, but we answer all of that in the codependency and jealousy class. Like, come back for that one when we have it.
And you said that one's your favorite class.
Yeah,
right?
That one is my favorite class, because that's the one where, as somebody who is very frequently wildly codependent and jealous, like that class is one where I get to like really share my mistakes. And I think that it just adds a whole other level to that when you're like bringing your life experience and like how you resolve these things, and like what resources were really helpful to you, and like what tools that you have in your tool belt to manage this stuff and continue to move forward. And so I really, really appreciate that class. And man, I sell myself out in it a lot, so it's fun.
So this is like your passion, because this isn't your full-time job by any means. This is just something that you really have a heart for.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, it's just it's just all about, like, at the end of the day, it's just all about community and love. And I think that generally speaking, there's not many parts of the universe that just don't need more of both of those things. And it's a way that I've connected with all of it, and it's a way that I can kind of share it and share pieces of myself with people. I get to meet amazing human beings.
Right?
Yeah, you end up on like podcasts and classes. Like, this is a version I never thought I'd see myself in. Like, I really just wanted to figure this out so that it just didn't suck and hurt so often. And then, now I'm like reaching out to podcasters, like, please let me be on your podcast.
Yeah, love it.
We love it.
Here's my pedigree. Like, yeah.
And it's it's a very unique situation. The fact that you also make the point that there doesn't always have to be sex involved.
Yeah.
We have a lot of really close connections that we've made that I wouldn't trade for the world, where there's no sex involved whatsoever. Right. And so you really have the ability to build your own family. And I love that. I love that you're here to share that with us. So tell us about your Netflix show. What's this about?
Oh, yeah. So Soria makes all of this stuff happen. Like, if she said, it's terrifying, honestly. Like, she has this weird ability to manifest stuff. And so, like, we have to be careful when she says stuff out loud, because it usually happens. And so she talked about for a while, like, man, it would be really cool if we could get the Fam Bam on TV. And away we went. So the show that we ended up being on, so there somebody saw, I don't even know exactly how this came into existence, but somebody saw a post online about a production company looking for non-monogamous relationships, couples, whatever, to be on this show. And so like Soria reached out and just like gave them a little blurb about who we are and how we operate. And so the show's called, at least the operating name of the show is called Sacred Spaces.
Okay.
And it's like a home renovation show, but for sex rooms.
Whoa.
Oh, unique.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did they actually come in and do a sex room in one of the homes?
They did, yeah. Les and Catherine, or the couple that we spend most of our time at their house, they built a room in their basement for the polyfam.
Oh, that's awesome.
Oh wow.
So this is the couple that lives together, I'm
Yep.
assuming, in
Yep.
your poly. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah,
So when
and
is that
so-
coming out?
Sometime in the first quarter is the last time that we've heard. First quarter 2022.
And it's
so
on Netflix.
Yep, it'll be on Netflix. So we did the majority of the filming. We did. It was in the middle of like heavy pandemic stuff. So the initial interviews were all like Skype and Zoom calls. So we did those with like the first round of producers, and then there's like a second round of producers, and there's like a third round of producers, and they like make the decision after that. And so they started filming late spring. I think we had total there were like 9 or 10 full film days. I think I was there for 5 or 6 of them.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and so it's like it's a really cool show. It's like lots of interviews, so they really get to know the people. The purpose of the show, it's a woman that was an elderly British lady. I wish I could remember her name right now. She's so much fun. This woman is so much fun. But she was like standard home designer like 30 years ago or 20 years ago, and she got a request from a client to like make a sex room, and then that became her career. And so
Oh, wow.
she has done this like all over LA and Hollywood, and she works with like kink.com and a lot of these like really heavy hitting ones. So like the actual room design, which I can't talk a lot about because the show isn't out yet, is just absolutely incredible. It's an amazing space. But they like interviewed all of us and asked us like what would be in your perfect room. Like so my answer was like cuddle puddle. Like cuddling is my favorite thing on earth. Like I want a space that is just designed for large amounts of people to pile in and snuggle. You'll have to watch the show if you want to see if I got that or not. But, yeah, and so there's other people that the polyfam's so diverse, and like our likes, especially like our kinks and stuff. And so one of the people's like first request was like a floor that you can hose off. Like that one made me laugh out loud on the show. So they were like, yeah, we just need to be able to spray everything down when we're done. Like, and so
that would make it a lot easier.
Right?
Right. Exactly.
God, that's
I'm
a really
saying,
specific thing
right?
too. God, genius idea.
Yep. So we went through and did all of our filming stuff, and yeah, there's a few other Colorado couples that are involved. There's a wide variety of different spaces that they did. I'm not sure how much I can talk about like all the different spaces, and I don't know a lot because they kept us pretty insulated from that. But I think it's going to be a pretty cool show. The whole idea and purpose of the show is really just like normalizing different sexual tastes and like bringing this stuff to the forefront and just being like, hey guys, this is all on the spectrum of normal. Like there's nothing wrong with any of this.
Thank you. It's the same
I
thing
love
we're
it.
doing.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and so we talked to them a lot about their vision for the show and what they were trying to put forward, because we have that, part of our fear around that is the show about sex spaces was that we'd be projected as like this like 7-person nonstop orgy, and that they would just like always want to hit on like the sexy details, and that's as a family really just not remotely what we're about.
Right.
And yeah, we just talked to them about their vision. All of that stuff lined up really well. They did a lot of filming and working questions around like our dynamics with each other and how we interact with each other, and how we all came to be. And they filmed a backyard barbecue and just hung out with us for a couple days and all
that's
kinds
awesome.
of stuff. So it was a fun experience. It was wild, like the whole makeup chair and like people like putting microphone cables all up in your clothes, and like rules on what you can and can't wear because of like this specific lists of patterns will make our cameras freak out and like all kinds of stuff. Yeah. So,
That's awesome. So Sacred Spaces.
Sacred Spaces. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll have to check that out on Netflix
Absolutely.
next year.
Absolutely.
So, what advice would you give to somebody that's looking at this type of lifestyle, or that's interested in relationship anarchy?
to try it out. I guess at the end of the day, like a lot of this is trial by fire. I think the best advice that I can have is first and foremost, you've got to love yourself. Like if you, especially from a perspective of like relationship anarchy, like there's definitely moments where it can feel like lonely. And those are the spaces that you really need to be able to fill that emptiness with just like a love for who you are. That was one thing that really helped me come into this is I spent, before really coming to my own in relationship anarchy, like there was a point in my life where like drug use, like constantly lying, infidelity, like all of those things that I had done, like really hiding from the world and who I was, like put me in this place where like I was like for the first time in my life truly alone. And a lot of the like dishonesty and stuff that I had been doing, the people that I had been hurting, like a lot of the ways that I was doing that, looking back on it, was just me trying to find a way to protect myself. Because at the end of the day, when I was alone, like I did not like the dude that I was. Like I just didn't like myself very much. And the more time I had to spend by myself, the worse off I was.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I finally, like through my own actions, got put in a position where like that was it. You know, I was super alone. And not long after that, and you know, I'd done a lot of work up to that point, but like there was definitely some lingering issues that were still causing issues for me. And so like the kind of darkest run of that is like the beginning of full blown COVID lockdown, you know? And so you're sitting in the middle of a lot of that stuff. And like for the first time, I just had to face myself. And it gave me an opportunity to, for the first time in a long time, really just connect with the things that I really love and then like go do those things like mountain biking and, you know, rock climbing and snowboarding and reading. My left sleeve is all my favorite book covers. My right sleeve is Colorado mountain stuff. So,
Oh, wow.
Okay.
That's awesome.
yeah. And so like really reconnecting with that and like working myself to this point where like now, like I look at my schedule and like I'm actively like, okay, I'm going to need to block 3 days off on this week because I need to hang out with myself for a little bit. Like I need to get back to my core, like get back to doing these things that I really love. And you know, through that, I gained this amazing ability to stop like fighting for these relationships that just weren't healthy for me, just because I'm like fighting for this relationship, because if I don't have this relationship, I might be alone. So no matter how toxic or dangerous this is to my mental health or my well-being, I'm going to do whatever it takes to keep that person around, to like, yeah, you know what, this just doesn't work for me. Like just isn't healthy for me. And
It's
like
not
just
sustainable.
kind of let it go. And yeah, it's been an amazing journey. You know, I'm in a place now where I'm just surrounded by like all of these amazing humans that I know I'm a daily choice for them and they're a daily choice for me. And like, I looked for security and connection so long for people like promising me that they'd always be there. And now that I have absolutely no one in my life that has made that promise to me, I have so much more security that there's a good chance that so many of them are going to be around, just because we're walking very similar paths.
That's right.
And if I do whatever lose them, like, yeah, it's going to suck and it's going to be hard, but I'm also at a place where I know that if that ever happens, it's because the end result of that was one of us becoming happier or having an opportunity to be happy. And I believe that if you really, really love someone, like you want them to be happy. And if that means not being in your life, then you got to let them go. You have to, yeah, you just have to let them slide out. Yeah.
You have to make sure that you love that person enough that they, no matter what they do, they know that what you want for them is to be happy.
Right.
And even if that means that you're not with them.
Right. Exactly.
You live alone?
Sort of.
You have cats. I know
I-
that.
I do have cats, and since you mentioned them, now I get to talk about my cats. So, I've got Siamese kittens now. They're like 25 weeks old or something like
Oh,
that.
wow.
Their names are Choss and Sketch. They're brother and sister. Those are both climbing terms. So a Chossy route is one that's like covered in moss and loose gravel and rocks and is like just dangerous and unclimbable.
Okay.
So that's Chaucy, and it fits her personality perfectly. And then Sketch is it's like an old extreme sports term, just like, man, that was super sketch. Like it was just dangerous or a bad idea, but you did it anyway. So I've got Chaucy and Sketchy, and so they definitely live with me. They're my little crag kitties. So one of my more consistent connections, and she's my climbing partner, the one that's been around, my most consistent partner. we take them out climbing with us, so we get them in like little harnesses, and they like roll down the trail with us.
Oh,
And, like,
that's
go on hikes with us.
hilarious.
Oh my gosh.
You take your cat climbing. I love
Yeah,
it.
both of them. Yeah. They've got their own Instagram. It's just Choss Sketch. You can search it up. CHOSSSKETCH. Yeah. So.
That's
Hilarious.
awesome.
Hilarious.
Yeah, and so. I just bought a place. Actually, my climbing partner is also a real estate agent. She was my realtor. She's the one that found it and sold it to me. So that was really, really cool that I got to use somebody in my non-monogamy circles,
Right.
to like help me go through that whole process. And so, I live there, but I have 2 roommates.
Okay.
So I'm renting out. It's 3-bedroom. The upstairs has a dual bathroom and then 2 rooms up there. So I'm renting those out to. They're freaking awesome. They both work down at Meow Wolf. Like,
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah. So they're very like creative, fun, energetic individuals. So like they've only been there for a few weeks now, but it's been a lot. It's been a lot of fun. They're really cool roommates. And then they have one of the roommates. She has a dog, Strawberry, which I don't know dog breeds, but it's like the cutest, fluffiest little dog animal I've ever seen. Like,
Strawberry.
so I live with Strawberry. Yeah. Choss and Sketch, and then my 2 roommates.
Love it.
So, do people know about your lifestyle, like you're at work or your family? Your
A few people at work know when I'm at work. Usually just talk about work stuff. I also
Right.
spend a really good portion of my day by myself. Like I don't have like coworkers. I work for a utility, so I like basically running operations. So I'm like running around and like checking stations and all of this other stuff. It's a lot of like alone time. If I'm not alone, I'm in a meeting for a very specific purpose, and it's a pretty skeleton crew. So it's nothing that I like actively hide there. But it doesn't come up a lot. One of my former coworkers and I were really, really close. So he obviously knew before he moved back to the East Coast. So it's nothing that I hide there. Obviously with like the Netflix show coming up and just like how prominent the polyfam is, like it's something that just isn't hidden. I talked to my sister, and I love her to death. We're really, really close. I appreciate her a lot. So she hears about all of the stuff. She's always been just incredibly loving and supportive. And I'm lucky with my family too. Like I was raised in an environment that's very like traditionally Christian. I've got that background. I was a youth director at a church for a while, so I've got like a lot of that history. And so I know that the rest of my family doesn't necessarily agree with it, but we also just don't talk about it a lot, and they love me no matter what. So that part's great.
Do you think they're easier on you because you're a male? Like, do you think if you were, your sister going through this, that they'd have a much harder time with her having multiple relationships?
Honestly, it'd be family member specific, but like my nuclear family, probably not. My parents are just like so, like. One of the things I've been told consistently since I was a little kid is like, there is literally nothing that you can do to make us stop loving you. Like there is no action you will ever be able to take that will like remove our love from your life. And they say it wholeheartedly, and they've definitely proved that and backed it up again and again and again. I think if anything, probably like the divorced 3 times is probably harder for the family to stomach than, than non-monogamous. But yeah, when I came out to my parents and I told them about it. My mom just kind of said, she was like, "Oh, so you've decided to be single and date for a while." And I was like, if that's the way that this makes sense inside of your head, I totally understand. That's a lot to process. So you're like, yeah, that's great.
She just simplified it.
Right.
Let's go with that.
But it is it's a lot more socially acceptable for men than it is for women. And that's why I asked that question, is because I feel like automatically women, just us saying that we're a slut on a public forum is shunned, versus, men, it's like, hey, hell yeah, you're a slut. Let me give you, congratulations.
Right, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And
true.
so I just was curious if, within your background, if your parents would have had you think they would have had a different problem with your sister.
Yeah. I'd be surprised. My sister is like a very monogamous person, so we're probably not going to have an opportunity to.
And your parents were too?
As far as I know, yeah.
Okay. Well, we can't thank you enough for coming on here, sharing your life with us.
Yeah, of course.
So much
It's really it's really interesting to hear your whole take on relationships and how you navigate that. And so we really appreciate you sharing that with not only us, with all those issues out there.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk about it for sure.
Absolutely. So check out one more time the Coalition for
Colorado Center for Alternative Lifestyles.
Colorado Center for Alternative Lifestyles, and then Sacred Spaces.
Sacred Spaces.
On Netflix.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
First quarter of 2022, correct?
Yeah. Unless something changes, that's when we've been told. So we're excited for it.
Perfect. Well, Ishes, you know where to check us out. Go online to monogamishpodcast.com. Make sure you join our Ish Tank so that you guys get notifications on all of our events and upcoming shows.
Right.
And make sure that you tune in next week for another great episode for season 3. We'll see you later.